And hi again, everybody. Welcome back to Sports Talk. Doug Miles, Don Henderson, our ad to run a second time. You only get one play on that, but good to have you with us tonight on a Monday night. Busy weekend of sports, a lot of football to talk about, maybe a little baseball too. But, Don, I thought we might kind of start off tonight as we do the show live on a Monday, but it'll play throughout the week. And, of course, later this week, hard to believe, the 50th anniversary, if you want to call it the anniversary, not really an anniversary. It's kind of a sad day, obviously, but commemoration, I guess, of JFK, what happened in Dallas back in 1963, and it has a sports connection to it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I will say that they've done a terrific job. NBC News is doing something every day this week. I thought that the Sarasota Herald did a nice job. They had some of the original pictures when he came through Tampa prior to, I think it was 3 days, if I'm not mistaken, prior to his trip to Dallas, and I think everybody has really the news shows have covered it very thoroughly, and on tonight's news, NBC had the Secret Service man that jumped on top of President Kennedy after he was shot and talked about 50 years ago and today, and tomorrow night they're going to do something with the wife of the police officer who was also killed on that day. So they have really devoted a lot of time to it, and I thought covered it very, very thoroughly.
I was watching a little bit of, on PBS, they put together a new documentary, really a long one, 4-hour documentary.
Yeah, I saw that.
On life and presidency and all that on PBS, and I think tonight, they've run this a few times already, like you mentioned, he came to Tampa. I did not know that until I seen this was going to be on earlier the month. In November of '63, came to Tampa for 2 or 3 days. So that's interesting to see what he did here.
It's amazing. You look at the cars and all the things that, I believe, I can't remember now, but I think he was in a Lincoln Continental. He was not in a Cadillac. He was in a Lincoln Continental, and also showed the fact that they had the bubble on it, and that he was the one that requested that they take it off, not just in Dallas, but also in Tampa. So when you see him in the car in Tampa, he doesn't have the bubble on there either.
You really realize how much of a different time it was when you see those old film footage, open cars like that, and the president even going into, crowds to shake hands. I mean, the president doesn't do that, and he can't now, no matter who's president. But just to shake hands, the crowd, I mean, that's unbelievable when you look at it from today's perspective, that they would even allow that.
Well, they tried their very, very best to, keep him away from any place where they can't have full coverage, and very wisely so. But as I say, I thought they'd done a great job all last week and into this week. Over the weekend as well, there were a couple of specials. And as you said, PBS has done a great job. So there really has been, it's hard to believe it's been 50 years, but amazing what has transpired over that 50-year period.
And so many books have been written. I think I heard a number of 40,000 have been written since 1963 with about every angle and conspiracy theory and whatever on what happened during that day and, the 3 days after, even leading up to it. Films have been made, some accurate, most probably not as accurate as you'd like. JFK, the Oliver Stone movie, that kind of, was almost all made up totally, but that's playing in a local theater down here. I saw that. They re-released that. So
I think
so many movies made about it, and but that movie really kind of set the conspiracy theorists off again.
Well, they say, I think they did a pretty good job. I know the people that watch any of the CSI shows or any of the detective-type shows now see how they, recreate through, artistic things. And then they have the arrow coming down, where the bullet would have come from. And I think they pretty much solidified that there was one shooter. The one bullet did deflect off President Kennedy and into the governor. And I think all the conspiracy ideas are out the window now. I think they pretty much firmed up exactly what happened.
I think everybody that's watched TV, like you said, those particularly CSI type of shows, everything's solved in 52 minutes. We're really disappointed now that we don't know more. All that information is out there. Why don't we know more about it? But that technology didn't exist then, so it took a long time. But I think there's probably more to the story. I don't think there's as much as people think. There are sealed files. I think they sealed them for 50 years or 60 years, something like that. A few years after it. So there's probably more to it that we don't know, but I don't think there's as much as people think. That's just
I really do believe that now with all the scientific availability that they have at the moment, as I say, I watched the other night when they did the total recreation, and showed right from the window within the building itself the bullet coming down, and the only really difference of opinion was whether there were two shots. That was how could he get two shots off that quickly? Well, and plus the fact that it wasn't a sophisticated type of gun that he was using. It was a little pretty
manual type of rifle. He had to cock it twice. Whatever they call it.
Right, and that was still a point of interest, but I think most everybody is convinced now was one nut that did it, and he just was crazy enough to plan to do it that way, and it turned out the way he wanted. So I think they pretty much solidified that.
And as sad as it is, obviously, President of the United States, and did not change the course of history. It's fun to kind of go back and think what would have happened if that didn't happen. What would have been different? So many things would have been different. Or what if for that election, which was very close, a couple 100,000 votes or less, Richard Nixon had won that, how many things would have been different then? So many things hinged on that day from then on that really changed that. I mean, you could really see how that changed the course of history, those 3 or 4 days.
No question, and Mr. Daley was a big part of changing history out there in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
And, but anyway, you're exactly right. And, of course, it wasn't the only time it happened. It happened in the election, a couple of elections back. And,
down here in Florida, sure.
Exactly, down here in Florida with the punch cards. And so that just happened once. It's happened a few times.
We kind of mentioned there was a tie into sports on it, and that weekend the NFL really took a lot of heat. They played games that Sunday, those 3 days. It was Friday that it happened, Saturday, and then Sunday was kind of the funeral or the procession, I believe, down Washington, down toward the Capitol and all that. But they played NFL football that Sunday, and Pete Rozelle, I remember reading about it, took a lot of heat for that. I don't know if you remember what you were doing that weekend. I guess you probably do. Everybody kind of knows where they were, but that was a kind of the tie-in with sports on that.
Absolutely. They made the decision, Pete Rozelle and the commissioner made the decision that they would go on with the football games on Sunday. They did take a lot of heat, a lot of criticism about it. I for one, don't think, it was that big a deal. I mean, I think you go on with life. You can't stop everything when something happens. And so I was not necessarily opposed to the games being played at that particular time, and I wouldn't be opposed to it today. And I can remember growing up, and on a personal basis, when you Morton Walker Cooper. Walker Cooper was a great catcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. Cooper was a great pitcher, and their father died the day before. I think the first or second game I think it was first game of the World Series, because they were the two stars of the series in name. And they went out and played, and we've seen a lot of times since then where players have done exactly that. The Green Bay Packers a few years ago, remember that?
Brett Favre, his father died the day before, I believe, right?
Exactly. And he went out and played. To me, if it were me dying and one of my kids were doing something like that, I would want them to continue on, because, you can mourn without, jumping around and crying and all that type of thing. And what happened with right now with she's the coach of the Giants.
Tom Coughlin's brother, right? He died,
his brother was. He died, right. And the same thing. They had the funeral a couple of days later, but he did not coach the game. And I sort of feel that's the right way to address it.
Yeah, I know during the 9/11, obviously, that came up again, and of course, that was early football. I don't think the football season had started yet, or maybe it had. Maybe that might have been the first weekend. They postponed the games a week, and of course, baseball was postponed for a week. But that was the situation back in '63. That NFL did take some heat for that. I don't think any of those games were on TV though, because obviously coverage was 24 hours through that whole Sunday, so they probably weren't even on television, those games.
You know, I really can't remember, to be honest with you, whether they were or whether they weren't. I just remember the games. They were on the radio. I know definitely they were on the radio. I don't know whether they were on TV or not. I can't remember. But, funny that today they're talking about NBC and the way they covered the president in 50 years. And tonight on the national news, one of the things that we was talking about was that three of the most interesting things over the weekend were three football games. First of all, the one in Baltimore. Baltimore had a 2-hour rain. They thought it was going to be a tornado, and they stopped the game for 2 hours. They were playing the Bears, for the people that aren't aware. So they stopped the game for over 2 hours, and the afternoon game became the night game.
Yeah, right.
And then he talked about the Auburn game that wound up with a unbelievable catch to win that game. And then he talked about the one between Temple and Florida, which was another unbelievable catch. So here we are talking about 50 years of Kennedy, and at the end of the newscast, he talks about three football games. So it's an odd situation.
Yeah, well, we'll get to the football in a few minutes, but I thought it was interesting. I saw another very interesting show on PBS. They did all the coverage of Kennedy, the news coverage, mostly Walter Cronkite, but they had some of the other guys like Bob Schieffer, who was there, and Dan Rather. He was kind of an unknown, young reporter at a Houston radio station, I think. He happened to be there and went to the hospital, Parkland Hospital. But I thought that was fascinating to kind of see that the TV cameras weren't even ready to go on the air live. He had to do almost a radio report with a still slide on the screen before he could get on the air, because the cameras took 25 minutes just to warm up.
Yeah, well, not only that,
it was a different era.
CBS is doing a whole thing on obviously the assassination of the people that were there and so forth. They did not invite Dan Rather.
No, he was not invited back because he's suing the network.
Everybody else was invited back. Dan Rather, who was there for eons, did not get invited back.
I just
Only
thought it
in
was
America.
Interesting today how fast information gets out, and Walter Cronkite had to really do a couple of radio reports until the studio camera was warmed up enough. It was the old tube cameras, wasn't instant on, and they had to wait about that time before he could go on the screen. But when you look at it, the coverage, it wasn't just Walter Cronkite. I mean, Huntley Brinkley were on, and I guess ABC must have somebody on as well. But really, we're down, two networks, maybe three. That was it, covering that.
I imagine it was Smith that would have done it on ABC. I'm not sure about that, but I would think that was who it was.
Smith, yeah, he could have been the guy then, right?
Yeah, and but anyway, it was quite a series of events, and you really contrast at 50 years what has happened. Kennedy talked about going to the moon, and holy smokes, the whole program has now been funded and defunded. So, and all the intricacies, as you say, we're talking about tweeting, we're talking about texting, we're talking, everything gets out within 10 seconds of when it happens.
And you listen to some of the clips of his speeches, and obviously Kennedy was a Democrat and all that, but you listen to some of them, and a lot of those things he talked about are today, you consider conservative. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That's obviously opposite of what the Democrats want now. It's what the country will do for you.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what the Democrats do want right now. Yeah,
that's a whole different ideology.
Right.
When you listen to Kennedy, it's completely different than the Democrats of today. I just thought that was interesting. I saw that on that show last night, some of his speeches. But
no question. I mean,
and he wanted the space program too. I mean, I think Eisenhower really started it, but Kennedy spearheaded it when he made that announcement. We'll go to the moon before the decade is out.
Yeah, because the Russians had started with Sputnik, and
right.
He felt we were, showing that we were behind the times, as we never are, and so it was important to him to start, the entire space program, and to prove that we could put people in space, not just a Sputnik, but we could put people in place. And look where it's grown to now.
And all that came out of the space program is, like you said, the tweeting and internet and all the medical technology and all of that. Computers came out of the space program. People tend to forget that.
No question. There's a lot of things connected with the space program that have helped, in many, many, many other areas. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to maybe less important, but not still entertaining. What happened over the weekend? You mentioned three of those games right there that had some wild endings and weird things with the weather in Chicago. I rarely see a weather delay this late in the season. Sometimes we get them in August or September because you have the lightning storm. That was a tornado coming through Chicago and the whole Midwest. That was very strange.
Yeah, there was a tornado out there, but let me just take a second to correct that. They played in Baltimore. The tornado wasn't, you're right, the tornado was in Illinois, but the game was played in Baltimore.
Okay.
I believe. I don't have the paper from me.
I thought they were in Chicago. Weren't they? I thought they were in Chicago, but I was flipping on the Red Zone channel. And,
wait a second, I got that. I did not see the game, so I can't comment, but I thought they were. Let me go back and take a look at the paper and see where the but I might be 100% wrong.
I'm pretty sure Chicago. They showed the map on Red Zone. They had the weather map on there and the satellite, and they were showing coming through the Great Lakes and all that. So
okay.
They were sitting there.
Okay. Yeah. Then you're right, and I'm wrong. I didn't. I really shouldn't have said. I just thought it was. I just assumed that it was there.
But that's very strange to have that this late in the year, even for the Midwest, to have that kind of weather, tornadoes and all that. But they did get that game in. But that was a strange game too. Finished very late, and kind of a strange ending to that one too. Bears hung on to win that one.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Well, if there's one team that's used to playing in that kind of weather, it's the Bears.
Used to be they play in the slop and the snow, but now you got to dodge tornadoes.
Yeah, you are exactly correct. The game was played in Chicago. You are exactly right. I thought it was in Baltimore. When I saw the highlight tonight on the news on NBC, I thought it looked to me like they were playing in Baltimore. But you're right, they were at Soldier Field in Chicago.
Yeah, that was a strange one. And then, of course, the pro games, Giants. Now they were going up against the third-string quarterback, although he had a pretty decent game. I didn't get to see a lot of it because it was on the Red Zone. But the Giants won 4 in a row out now, and they actually have a chance next week to play for. It won't be for the division because the Eagles won; they're ahead of them, but they can tie the Cowboys.
Yeah, they got the Cowboys next week, and you got to give Tom Coughlin all the credit in the world. He's been able to turn that franchise around after dropping, he dropped 6 in a row. Pretty tough to turn things around and have them win 4 in a row. So you're exactly right. Well, it'll be a big, big week next week when they play the Cowboys. And, of course, I can say the same thing for Chip Kelly in Philadelphia. The Eagles looked like a disaster after winning that first game in Washington. And jumping on the board looked like Kelly. Remember, everybody was raving about the fast offense and all the rest of it. And then it looked like they never played pro ball before for the next 4 weeks. And he's been able to completely turn that franchise around. And now they're one game over 500 in first place in the East. So even on the post-game show yesterday, when I got back, I just saw enough of the Fox Sports game show. They talked about Johnson especially talked about what has happened in the NFC East and what the Giants and certainly the fact that they've been able to completely turn the franchise around and win games, and now it's a horse race.
And Giants still aren't playing their best football either. They're playing better, obviously. Anytime you go 0-6, you got to play better, but they still haven't really hit their stride. And it'll be interesting to see now. They're going to go up against the starting quarterback for one of their opponents. But that'll be interesting to see how they do next week. Of course, a 3-game homestand, very unusual in the NFL to play 3 straight games on your home field, too. So they're taking advantage of it, at least so far, and next week will be a big. You'll be up there if you can go see that one.
Yep, I got a good shot to be able to go up there and see that ball game. I'll be back No,
Oh, actually, you won't.
I won't be back till Monday. No, I won't be back till
That's
Monday,
right.
so I won't be able to see it unless I see it on TV. I'm leaving Monday morning, and I won't be there on Sunday.
Well, you talk about the Eagles and how they've kind of come back a little bit after some, pretty bad games and some injuries for their quarterbacks. But you look how bad the Redskins are now. I mean, R.G. Griffin almost kind of indirectly, I guess they were saying tonight, was criticizing the coaching staff because it looked like the Eagles knew what was coming, and he even said that it looked like they knew what was coming yesterday. They've really fallen down on hard times, Redskins.
Well, I just don't think that move bringing him back. He had a great run in Denver. He was a great coach, but it's like bringing back when the Washington Redskins first. Yeah,
Joe Gibbs.
Although his racing team's doing better than ever, but as far as his football coming back, he was just sort of a step and a half behind everybody else when he got back on the field, and I just think they found out that the same thing is happening now. I just think you can't bring somebody who was supposedly a great football coach and bring him back to another organization and try to redo it all over again. It doesn't happen very often.
It rarely works. I think Parcells was able to do it with the Patriots, took them to a Super Bowl, and then did fairly well with the Cowboys. He's about the only one that has gone from one team to another, and
right.
Been
and he did it with the Jets too. He did it with the Jets as well.
So it took him to a championship game, right? The conference championship.
Right. Yeah.
But very difficult to win. Obviously, nobody's done it. Won with two different teams, won the Super Bowl, but very hard in the NFL to do that. Basketball, baseball, you can do it. Hockey has been done many times, but for some reason, football, it's harder to do.
Even the great Lombardi, when he went to Washington, didn't. Of course, he got sick pretty quickly after he got there, but
right.
It's just not the easiest thing to do. You build up an organization and a great staff, and then the organization drafts well, and you put it all together and with your coaching skills, and then you try to go to in most times, the people that want to hire you have a less than successful team, and it takes 4 or 5 years to get it going again, and it's pretty tough to do. With just doesn't happen very often.
Did you see that interview? It was interesting. In the Post yesterday, they interviewed Lombardi's son. I thought that was interesting. Steve Serby. I don't know if you saw that article he did with him.
I did not. I did.
Every Sunday.
Yeah, I usually get the Post. Usually get the Post on Sunday, but yesterday I did not. I didn't see any ball games, and I didn't get the papers yesterday. We had a sort of a family thing going yesterday. It didn't end until about 6:30, 7 o'clock last night.
You did important things. You didn't waste your time with frivolous sports. But it was an interesting interview. His son, I guess his son is in his 70s now, but the interview asked him where he was during the Ice Bowl, what was his relationship with his father, and he said, it wasn't always the greatest, and even at the end, it wasn't as close as he would have liked. So Lombardi, really lived and breathed, that type of personality where he was very tough, even on his family. Winning was the only thing to him.
Yeah, when you read the last biography, they talked about that a great deal, about the relationship with his wife and with the kids. And
it was not great.
No, it wasn't that great, and that sometimes happens. I mean, you get devoted to what you're doing, and it becomes very difficult to split the time. And I mean, Dick Vermeil, who I was familiar with when he was with Philadelphia, the same thing happened to him. He'd stay at his office all night, and would get home for 2-3 days at a time, and the pressure and so forth. And it really forced him to step aside for a number of years before he finally came back. And I don't think he would have come back then if he hadn't had some good people around him that wanted him to coach again.
I think it was 17 years. Like he was in the broadcast booth for most of that time. Did very well. Then the Rams convinced him to come back, and I think he even said when he went in he wasn't going to do that stay till 3 a.m. anymore. I don't know if he wound up doing that there, but he won quick enough where he was able to then, I think, get another year. Then he went to Kansas City for a couple of years. Okay, but that was it.
Carl Peterson he brought Carl Peterson with him from UCLA to the Eagles, and then Carl Peterson became the president and general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs, and he convinced him to come back and coach again in Kansas City.
Yeah, I don't know that.
They were great friends. They were great friends from early on back at UCLA.
Yeah, okay. That helps to have a friend if you're a coach that owns a team.
You got that right.
Well, Kansas City didn't quite do as well last night, Don, in that game against the Broncos. Peyton kind of exploited them pretty good. Was protected very well and really kind of took them apart a little bit.
Yeah, that's a game I can talk about because I actually saw it. I was hoping time to see that one. And you're exactly right. Manny took advantage of every opportunity. As they said time and time again on the first game shows and during the course of the broadcast and telecast, he was never touched. I mean, the offensive line against the Kansas City team that was noted for getting sacks, he was nobody even came close to him. I mean, it was one of those perfect games from an offensive line standpoint. Their quarterback never got touched.
And he wasn't moving around well either. I mean, Peyton had the high ankle sprain, and you could see him hobbling, but boy, he was right on target with some of those. I didn't see every play, but the ones I saw, a couple of those passes, like right in the guy's arms and in stride. I mean, he was right on target last night.
Well, I thought they made a good point. He was good when he was dropping straight back. The one time where he had to make that quick cut to the left, he completed the pass, but you could see, and they remarked about it, Al Michaels remarked about it as well, that you could see that, had Kansas City been able to put pressure on him and make him go left to right or do some of that, he would have had a lot of trouble. But they weren't able to do that. He got rid of the ball so quickly, and which he always does anyway, but even more quickly in the situation he was in last night, shows why he's such a great quarterback.
Now they play again in 2 weeks in Kansas City. Kind of unusual to have two divisional games played that close this late in the year. Usually they'll spread them out a bit, but that'll be interesting to see. But that's really the first time Kansas City is, I mean, not taking anything away from Andy Reid, who's done a great job there, but they have had played a last place schedule up until they played Denver last night. So that was really their first big tough test.
Yeah, they pointed that out a great deal on the pregame show and even during the ball game itself. That you look at the schedule, they were 9-0, but they hadn't really played a team. And the funny thing is, you say you didn't play a team when the schedule comes out. I mean, who would have thought that Baltimore, San Francisco, the teams that were right at the very pinnacle last year, Super Bowl competition, and here they are. Baltimore's been a disaster. Pittsburgh has been a disaster. You just never can tell. And San Francisco, they're not a disaster, but they certainly aren't, ringing up the wins like they did 2 years ago. And just the opposite for New Orleans. New Orleans lost their coach for a year because of the trouble in the organization. He comes back, and they're right back in the hunt again. So I guess coaching does mean something somewhere.
I'm still trying to figure out how the Jets beat New Orleans 2 weeks ago, and then they played the way they did yesterday.
It is. It is amazing when you think about it, and you think you can plot the games out, and as a coach is saying, and you're right, you play it 1 week at a time. You can't look, and like for instance, right now they can't look and say, well, we're going back to Kansas City in 2 weeks. They better worry about what's going to happen this coming Sunday, not what's going to happen 2 weeks from now.
Well, we're going to try and get our next guest on, and do something. John Rothschild is going to join us. He's written a book about football handicapping, speaking of trying to pick the NFL. John Rothschild, is that you?
I am here.
Hi, Doug Miles and Don Henderson. We're on the air. I know you were calling the other number. I saw that dialing in, but we figured we'd give you a call, and thanks for joining us tonight. How are you?
Hey, Doug. It's nice to be with you. Listen, I was just looking up your impressive resume, and I saw the first thing that came up was that you interviewed Bill Cosby. And is that correct?
Right, we had him on a couple of years ago. Yeah, actually, Don knows him quite well. Don Henderson, who's on the line as well with us, my co-host. And Don, you probably can tell better stories about Bill. You work with him a lot with Temple.
Well,
hey, Don, you know what I was going to say was that I was raised walking distance from his house.
Oh, you're from
in
Philly?
Pennsylvania, yeah.
Oh, how about that? Well, I'll tell you, the Parade magazine this week had a very nice little featuring the piece. He's going to do a special, and you know, he really he's just an outstanding man. I mean, there's no question about it. And he talks in the little article in Parade this week about why he never reduced himself to using inappropriate language, things like that. And
wanted to, yeah.
Yep. I mean, that has always been his strength, and he's never changed it. And where'd you live in Center City? He was down the projects.
This was actually in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Probably about 10 miles from Temple University.
Yeah. Okay. But just a terrific guy. But we got you on to talk about some sports. But it's always good to talk about Bill, and he's going to be coming back here to Sarasota. I think,
next March, I think. He's coming
I think it's March. We had him on with us just a couple of days before he made his appearance down here last year. And tell you, just I can't tell you enough good things about Bill. And at Temple, of course, he and Dr. Lee, of course, were great friends. And I did the basketball games there for 17 years and traveled with Bill. He came to a lot of the games with Dr. Lee, of course. And he has quite a relationship with Temple University, as you probably well know.
Absolutely. And that's where I went to graduate school.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You know, people really don't. It was funny because we talked about it before you joined us about the miracle catch yesterday against Temple. They should have won a ball game and they wound up losing a game.
Two miracle plays, yeah.
Yeah, it was on NBC News today. You don't usually see Temple football on NBC News on the nightly newscast, but that was one remarkable catch. And you know, people don't realize that Temple University, you know, it's a doctoral program, it's hospital, it's law school. You know, it's a dominant school in the Northeast and in certainly Philadelphia. And if you talk around the country, not many people have heard about it to the extent that you and I who have lived there know about it.
I agree. So want to talk about the book a little bit?
Absolutely.
I was just going to say the full title, Rothschild's Guide to Football Handicapping. And I guess, you know, you studied in grad school, but you also probably spent some time looking at point spreads, huh?
I did. You know, a lot of people ask me how I got into the business, and I was a kid. I got into medical school as a young man, ended up getting my undergraduate degree, and then getting a master's in business, and had a little success. Got into the racehorse business, and from there that led into football handicapping, and I made some great associations, and we sort of developed. I don't want to say systems, but some great angles that help us every week.
Well, I'll tell you, I worked at Philadelphia Park Racetrack for a number of years. At the same time, I was working at WCAU in Philadelphia and did the races over there. And I'll tell you, it really is once you get hooked on racing, but Doug and I talk about it a lot. Even the Breeders' Cup this year doesn't get nearly the attention that it used to as far as being on the major channels and having all the races and all the rest. It's been a very tough sport to come back.
It is, and I'm trying to get racing a little more visibility. I was just on the air with Keith Jones, the announcer at Philly Park, and Dick Girardi, who a lot of people know from basketball and also from the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, Dick has worked for the Philadelphia Daily News for any number of years, and he's really one of the great race columnists in the country.
Yep. And while we're there, I just want the listeners to know that we have a website. It's called freewageringadvice.com. And you can go to the site and see how to order the book, but you can also email me with any questions. And I really try to get back, this is about football handicapping, to anybody that emails me within an hour.
Until
kickoff this evening.
I wanted to ask you though, John. I mean, not to denigrate anything, but you tend to see, not as much anymore, but those shows on TV on the weekends that they're touting the 800 numbers and what they used to be the 900 numbers. It kind of has a negative connotation. Is that something difficult for you to kind of break through? I mean, nothing wrong.
I have a very different relationship with people I deal with. Most of those guys who have the 800 numbers are pumping gas at night. Or living with their parents downstairs. We're a little more technical. We really preach just thinking outside of the box and looking at things a little bit differently. You asked if when I was younger in high school and in undergrad school, if I was handicapping and looking at point spreads. And, back then I was like everybody else. I sort of thought of Team A be Team B, Team B be Team C, that Team A was going to be Team C, and that what happened last week was going to happen this week, and it doesn't. And you can make a lot of money, or at least certainly do better than most, if you look at things just a little bit differently.
Well, we talked this before you came on about that, and I think this week was a perfect example. The teams that you thought were dominant teams, and unfortunately, you talk about the Baltimore Ravens right now, you talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, you talk about the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, these were teams that were almost unbeatable at times last year, and boy, it certainly hasn't turned out that way this year, that's for sure.
We can have some fun with the teams near Sarasota. I mean, you've got Tampa Bay, who couldn't win a game.
Right.
Then they go and they beat Miami. Atlanta is basically on the golf course at this point. But, I mean, they almost beat Seattle in Seattle, and that was without Doug Martin, without Mike James, with a quarterback that's not very mobile, a guy named Bobby Rainey, who I'd never heard of before.
Well, he had a big day yesterday. He caught a touchdown pass and ran it for one, and I think he gained 143 yards. And he was,
when I saw him,
I did Cleveland, and they got him off. They got him from Cleveland for nothing.
But I wanted to go back and check on him. A couple of years ago, I think he came out of college late at 24. He was just a gorilla at the combines. He had a lot of records down there.
Right. Western Kentucky, wasn't he?
Very good, yeah. And I want you to know, if you beat Atlanta, I played football at the same school that Matt Ryan went to. But his career's gone a little bit farther than mine did.
What position did you play?
I was a running back.
Oh, okay.
This is a bench charter. And a couple other things that you might get a kick out of if we're talking sort of the Tampa Bay. One of the angles I have in the book are teams that end a season on a winning streak generally are overbet the next season and are usually great teams to bet against. Great examples would be Washington from last year, New England from the year before, and Tampa Bay the year prior, when they ended up so well and then just couldn't win a game. And I think they only covered 2 or 3 games the following season.
Well, it's all emotion, isn't it, John? I mean, people bet with their hearts mostly, even though they think they're betting with their heads.
Absolutely. I have a whole chapter on do's and don'ts, and the second point under don'ts is just don't bet on a feeling. We tend to sort of have polygynous thinking and make these categories and jam numbers and crunch numbers into them and sort of convince ourselves that our team is going to win or find angles that really don't exist. You've got to look at these things very, very pragmatically.
But people, the other thing is that greed takes over. Greed always takes over, and that's what kills you.
Absolutely.
If you can bet for one team and win, if you bet a parlay, you can win more, and if you bet a trifecta, you can win more, and the odds against it are just unbelievable.
Did you memorize the book? Because the point right after that in don'ts is don't parlay and don't tease. Because for your listeners, parlay means you've got to win more than one bet. And the sports books take out a much bigger chunk on those wagers, and that's where they make the majority of their money.
The interesting thing, you probably have something in the book about it. Unfortunately, we haven't had a chance to read it yet, but, the state of New York has been fantastic with bookmakers and how much money they made. Then the state took over, and they went bankrupt.
And you know what's sort of funny with that? You sort of have to build a casino or a sports book or the neighboring jurisdiction is going to. But pretty much I sort of feel like the Fed is just feeding the gambling money to the state because you see people going to these casinos, taking their pension checks, taking their Social Security checks, spending it at the casinos, and then a portion of that gets cycled off and goes right into the state.
No
A couple things you might get a kick out of.
The Guide to Football Handicapping is the title of the book. Go ahead, John. I just want to get off the title again.
Oh, thank you. And again, it's Rothschild's Guide to Football Handicapping. And if you want to know anything about the book, and I'd like to get back to some fun angles in the Florida area again, but it's an easy read. You can get through it probably in a day and take advantage of a lot of the angles. I think you'd get a kick out of one I just got the other night, which was when I was on right before Monday Night Football, especially from who wrote it. I just read the review. It said, enjoyable and suitable for anybody interested in learning about team matchups and the factors needed to determine the ultimate outcome of a game. Recommended reading for both experts and novices. A treasure for those who wager, as long as you bet legally. And then it's signed G. Wolf, former executive with the Internal Revenue Service.
What information should you go by, John? I mean, there's all those pregame shows, shows during the week. I mean, you can read up every story you want, all the stats. I mean, there's got to be one or two keys that you go by. I mean, how do you know what's good to go by and what isn't?
There's not one or two, but let me just get back to your point about what we see on ESPN and Fox. Everybody sees that information, and most of the analysts are great at giving you some tips. They're not really good at picking games. So what I try to teach you in the book is to pick out certain things that will work for individual games. There aren't any systems, but there are angles that work in certain situations. Some are complicated. Some are incredibly easy, and I can give you a really easy one that comes from the Florida area. I call it Bubble Busters, which works for college football. Teams that are undefeated after at least 4 or 5 or 6 games or get taken out of major bowl consideration. So if you've lost your first game or get taken out of major bowl consideration, you may not lose your next game, but you're probably not going to cover. And this usually hits about 78 to 80% of the time. And a great example would be a couple of weeks ago, Miami was undefeated. They lost, and then I think they missed covering the spread by 22 points the following week.
Yeah, they lost back-to-back. They lost the first game.
That's right. Yeah.
And they came right back and lost again. But let me ask you this, because it's always been, and I've heard a lot of different versions of how they go about doing it and who actually puts it all together. But it seems to me almost incredible that by Sunday night at midnight, you get the line on next week's games. And I want to tell you, if you look at that line week after week after week, they don't make very many mistakes.
Good point. A couple things. First of all, you can actually get the lines about 10 days before. Some of the sports books have them. The LVH, Las Vegas Hilton, has them sometimes 11 and 12 days before. The lines aren't really as close as everybody thinks they are, but you wonder how they do get so accurate. One key point in the book also is if you can get to these lines early, every week you're going to find 2 to 3 mistakes. If you know how to spot these mistakes, and we try to teach you how to do that, there's a lot of money to be made if you get your bets in early.
College better than pro, John, or does it not matter as far as
you're asking all the right questions. Yeah, I find college much easier than pros. The pros, I just, at least after a college game, if a game didn't go the way I anticipated, I can go back, look at the tape, look at some of the players, look at some bad calls, and figure out why it didn't go the way I thought it would. Sometimes in the pros, teams just don't play like they ever expect, and there's no way to figure out, why last week San Francisco could only score 9 points, which is actually a key angle for tonight's game with New England and Carolina.
Well, the other thing, you don't have to go very far back. Just go back to last night. The fumble recovery by Kansas City, and then the very next play on a sweep to the left, they kick it right back over. And to me, that was pretty much the turning point of the game right there.
Yeah. And if you want to go on another fun, you're not too far from Florida State, I would assume. But did you happen to see the line on Idaho with Florida State?
I haven't seen a number. It's got to be, 20 or 30 or 40?
I've never seen a number like it. It's minus 56.
56, all right. Yeah, I know it'd be big. I don't
56,
know.
yeah.
Well, you
For
know,
all the listeners out there, if you're
interesting
not
part
sure
about
of
that, John, that I really don't understand. I know Phil Mustick writes about this all the time, but I have to agree with him. I mean, when you get the score up to 50-7, I mean, why do you have to go any further? You know, why not put the third-string guys in, the fourth-string guys, the guys that take the battering on what? But that's not the way sometimes that's not the way it operates. And I mean, look what happened with Ohio State right now. They're screaming and yelling because they're third instead of second. Baylor, I saw the whole Baylor game the other night. And Baylor's a great team, but Baylor can't stop anybody else from scoring. I mean, they score 40 points a game, but they give up 35.
Yeah, and they actually gave up their points early. But, you know, you're asking all the right questions, because another angle in the book, if you think you know the answer to this, you don't always, are coaching intentions. There's some college coaches that run up scores. There's some that need to run up scores to get better BCS consideration. And there's others that just, you know, they want to put in their second and third stringers and not get their first stringers injured.
That, to me, that's always been the sensible part. The coaches that, you know, and I think last night, for instance, watching the Manning operate when there was 6 minutes left in the game, the reason he doesn't lose is because he's smarter than everybody else. You know, he handles the game management with Manning is unbelievable.
Everybody said that Denver was going to be in trouble because the coach was in the hospital. I'm like, no, he's still on the field.
You're right there.
Well, John, realistically, I mean, let's say you want to, you know, bet a full season of football. You know, you really shouldn't expect to win 90%. I mean, around 60 is what I heard. You're really doing well with the spread. Is that accurate?
60 is a phenomenal number. We actually hit 65% last year. Unfortunately, this year we're a little over 61, so hopefully we can get that up a little bit.
Well, I really look forward to
53%.
I look forward to getting a chance to read the book. I know that we're going to send it into Doug, but I'm going to go back next week to New Jersey, and I'll be up there. I'll be there until after Christmas, then I'll come back here to Sarasota. But I really look forward to taking a look at it and getting some of your ideas, because Doug and I have we've tried our luck with dogs, we've tried our luck with horses, we've tried our luck with football. And
well, I appreciate it. Have fun. The book is really funny. It was intended so that, you know, a football book, you say, good gosh, it's got to be dry. I wanted to write a book that you couldn't put down. So some of the reviews said it's one of the funniest books they've ever read. And another neat thing is the final chapter is an exam. Take a test, see how well you do.
John, before we wrap up, I just want to ask you, I'm heading out to Vegas the end of December. Is the money line better to bet? I mean, that seems at least you get a little bit better chance there. You don't worry about points as much, right?
That's a tough call. Everything's an individual game. There's as I said, there's no systems. You have to look at each game ethnocentrically as its own microcosm.
Do you do baseball as well, or no?
No, too much time. I do nothing but football and horses. That's it. I mean, I could do baseball for you, but I would lose. What?
Now, let me ask one last question from my standpoint, and
yeah.
Now, if you're doing Saratoga as opposed to going Belmont, going Philadelphia Park, going Santa Anita, going whatever, to me it seems like it's a lot easier to handicap at Saratoga because the horses are so much better.
Well, first of all, I have a house up at Saratoga, so you asked the right guy. Yeah, I mean, of course, you know, you've got the colloquialism that Saratoga is the graveyard of favorites. I don't know. I actually find the easiest New York track to be Aqueduct, especially in the wintertime, because they only race on dirt, and there's a lot less factors.
Huh.
Well, John, appreciate you taking a few minutes to join us. I know you're busy time of the season, but again, the name of the book is Rothschild's Guide to Football Handicapping. Give out that website again.
It's freewageringadvice.com, and again, no charge. Just click on, ask me any questions. I'll try to get back to you within the hour.
John, great. Thank you very, very much. Very entertaining.
Great questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
I'll see you later.
We'll talk to you again. John Rothschild joining us on the show, and you must spend all day just doing research.
It sounds like it. His graduate school must have headed him in the right direction.
Didn't exactly give us specifics, but none of those guys ever do. But if you,
Well,
if you got anything out of that,
I didn't want to ask him how much money he was making out of this because.
No, not that. But I mean, what you look for, you want to make sure you get the book. But I hope that helped anybody out there interested in it. But there's so many. I mean, like you said, those shows. There's not as many on anymore. Those shows on Saturday or Sunday morning where they're all just touting their 800 number. I don't think he does that. But there's probably similar information in the book and the website.
Well, the only thing I can tell you is that if Mike Ditka had made as much money, with his 800 number, why he wouldn't be bothered around with TV and everything else.
That's right. I mean, you watch more football than anybody. I watch a lot. I mean, and you can't pick from week to week. I mean, look at the Jets yesterday. After beating New Orleans 2 weeks ago, a week off with the bye, you figure, they're going to come out and beat up on Buffalo. And they were the worst. That was one of the worst games probably in the last 2 years.
Well, the only one that he touched on that I would agree with when he talked about Atlanta should be out on the golf course right now. Not only the injuries that they've sustained, they've been wiped out injury-wise, but I think they've pretty much packed the season in. They scored 21 against Tampa yesterday, 21 or 27, something like that. I don't have the paper in front of me.
Yeah. They made the Bucs look like the Super Bowl contenders again. I mean, Lennon looked great.
Yeah, not only that, but you got to give Sienna credit after all the criticism and troubles that he had to get the team back to win 2 games in a row. Even though one of them was Atlanta, we'll see what happens this weekend coming up. But you got to give him all the credit. He certainly held that team together under very adverse circumstances.
And every sports show you watch or hear said he's gone. So. So to win 2 in a row now, I mean, I don't know what he has to do to say. Now, the Glazers never fire anybody with a lot of time left in their contract anyway, except when they did to Gruden, but that was an aberration. He has 3 years left, I believe, after this year, doesn't he? Or 2 years, maybe.
I think it's been here. I thought it was a 5-year contract when he came down, but I'm not positive of that.
Yeah. So, and $3 million is not bad, but $3 million a year isn't a huge amount of money. But they would have to probably win 6 games, I would think, for him to come back. Don't you think? 6 total.
Well, when you say $3 million is not a huge amount of money, that depends on who you're talking to.
Right. I mean, as far as the owners to buy it out.
Right.
Bought out,
I'm just kidding. But $2 or $3 million for us would be all right.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't sneeze at it, but I think he has to probably go 6 and 10, and then But I mean, who knows? They may say we'll bring him back anyway because they don't want to have to hire another coach. But he has been, he has been hit hard. I mean, he put up banners. Radio stations putting banners in your own hometown to fire you. That's never a good sign.
Not only that, billboards too. Wasn't just banners.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, billboards all over the place. And you're right. Not one of the. You don't want to put that in your resume.
No. I give him some credit. I mean, he could have really lashed out and, lost control in some of those press conferences, and I haven't really heard him do that.
No.
He tends to be relatively calm, with all the losses, and they won 2 in a row now, so I'm giving credit for that. So who knows? He may be able to turn it around, but
the other thing we ought to touch on just a moment is Stamkos and what's happened with the Bolts. I mean, it's incredible that the record is what it is. And the first game out, they played maybe their best game of the year. Did not play real well last night, but they're really a force right now, and you got to give Mr. Vanek a lot of credit. I mean, he's done everything in his power to get Eiserman to bring people in and be a competitive team, and they had another 900 there the other night. So I'll tell you, I think that's quite a story.
Yeah, last week on the show was the day Stamkos broke his leg last Monday afternoon in the afternoon game, and
right.
If you're a Lightning fan, you think that's the end of the season, but they've rallied around it a little bit now. Remains to be seen how well. I think their goaltender, I believe, didn't one of the goalies go down today on IR? I'm not sure.
I know they pulled him in last night's game. I haven't seen anything about the IR, but they did pull a goaltender last night, and the other thing is they got, I believe, a 5
the Islanders goaltender. Islanders goaltender.
Islanders goaltender, right?
Yeah, I misread that. It was Islanders, not Lightning. So yeah.
Okay, and but it's a 5-game road trip, isn't it? They're all out west.
Right. Yeah, they played in Phoenix the other night. Mike Smith, their former goalie, had a good game against them.
Right. So this will be a little bit of an indicator as to me they're going to have to be a little more offensive conscious. I mean, you look at the National Hockey League, and you pretty much have to score 3 goals or more to win. And so without Stamkos in there, they got to score 3 because they're going to give up a few, and so they've got to find some way to have some other personnel step up and fill the spot.
What do you think? Last week they kind of floated this out. The NHL did. I guess they want to eliminate a lot of these shootouts. Seems like most of the overtimes are going to shootouts now. Of maybe introducing a 3-on-3 kind of situation instead of 4-on-4. What do you think of that?
Well, I think they're trying
to increase
their best.
The goal scoring in the overtime.
Yeah, I think they're trying their best to adjust the game. First of all, and you and I have talked about this so often, Americans want scoring. And soccer, they're trying to find new ways to score for soccer, make it more competitive for United States TV viewers, and the same thing for hockey. I mean, they've taken major steps in the last 4 or 5 years to open the game up, to get more shots on goal, to score more goals, and people like to see it. So, and I think I think it's a good idea. Try it, see what happens. I'm not all for the shootout, to be honest with you. I've never been really a big advocate of that shootout, but anything that will help the game become more of a television game is the only way you're going to grow the game.
I'd like to see them just play it out like they do in the playoffs, but they never go for that.
No, you can't because first of all, you got too much. You got too many games. Too many games and too much travel. When you had the original 8, you could do that. They only limited that during the war, but you could do it then because you had time between games and you only had, 34, 36 games you played all year. Now you're playing 80, and there's no way that you can do that.
But it's really the only sport that does that. Football, to a sense, they'll play a 15-minute and then stop. But basketball plays it out. Baseball plays it out. I'd like to see them play it out in hockey. Ties them. At least they get rid of the tie. I mean, the tie was a joke. Never liked the tie. But I agree with you. The shootout has lost its novelty. I think 3-on-3 wouldn't be bad. I mean, you don't want it to be gimmicky, but 3-on-3, I guess, would be kind of interesting for an additional 5 minutes rather than 4-on-4 for 5 and then 3-on-3 for 5. That might not be bad.
Yeah, I do. I think it would be. As I say, I'm all for anything that makes the game because most of the people that you talk to, and you and I go to a lot of the games, most of the people you talk to say it's great when you're there, but I can't watch it on TV. I don't know where the puck is. You don't know what anybody's doing except the guy that's got the puck. And, Fox tried, remember years ago when they put the blind, whatever that line, well, now they do it in baseball. But
they had the glowing puck on Fox.
Yeah, right. They tried all that stuff, and that didn't work. It didn't work. And,
it became more confusing if you didn't follow the game anyway.
Yeah, it's just, to me, to bring in gimmicks, that doesn't fix it. That doesn't fix the problem. You got to come up with a solution as to how to make the game more entertaining for people sitting at home.
Well, I don't know what happened to the G-Man tonight, Don. Jimmy's having a party at Jimmy Johnson's house. Jimmy won the NASCAR thing. I mean, he didn't win the race yesterday, but he won the overall cup, so congratulations to him. So G-Man must be partying with Jimmy.
Yeah, he only had to finish 23rd or better to win it, and he got his 6th, so now he's only one behind the great Petty, Richard Petty, and for the all-time, they have two drivers at 7. He's at 6, but he's done it in 6 years. So, there's no reason to think that his team is not going to come back and continue to dominate the field because he's got, his people on the track are not only good, but the people back in the garage are good.
Yeah, impressive season for him. So, G-Man, hopefully we'll talk to you next week. And, Don, we'll talk to you next Monday. I know you're doing a little traveling, but have a good week. We'll grab a little breakfast before you head out and enjoy whatever you're going to do this week.
You got it, partner. I'll talk to you later.
Enjoy your week, everybody out there. Thanks for listening.